Maybe it was just that very day that Lebanon and Israel were at it.
It was the 17th day of the raging war in Lebanon, and there were a lot of people worrying that the crisis was escalating out of control.
Since I was a kid, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, now in the new millennium, you can read of an ever-escalating kind of conflagration over there in the Middle East. I remember thinking when I was 20, man, that place is going to drag us all into the black hole, you know? Just the difficulty over there. And you start thinking, well, I ever see my grandchildren grow up, you know? What's going to become of the world? Who's going to press the button? And that's fear-related, okay? So, you know, you have your own fears about these things.
But there's a difference between saying that place is a tinderbox and the constellation of things happening there could take us all down, and saying the Jews are responsible for all the wars.
Well, I did say that.
The Jews are responsible.
Well, strictly speaking, that's not true, because it takes two to tango.
What are the Jews responsible for?
What are they responsible for? I think that they're not blameless in that conflict. There's been aggression and retaliation and aggression. It's just part of being in conflict and being at war. So they're not blameless. Of course they're not. Okay, now when you're loaded, you know, the balance of how you see things, it comes out the wrong way. I know that it's not as black and white as that. I know that you just can't, you know, roar about things like that. That it's wrong.
A lot of people are going to say, wait a minute, he's still blaming the Jews.
No, but I didn't say that.
He's still blaming Israel.
No, did I say that?
After several rounds on the Middle East, he said this is his statement of his true feelings.
Let me be real clear here, in sobriety, sitting here in front of you, national television, that I don't believe that Jews are responsible for all the wars in the world. I mean, that's an outrageous, drunken statement.
So was something else eating at him that night. He says he has also realized he had been harboring an old resentment.
And the other place it may have come from is, you know, as you know, a couple of years ago I released the film Passion. Now, even before anyone saw a frame of film, for an entire year, I was subjected to a pretty brutal sort of public beating. And during the course of that, I think I probably had my rights violated in many different ways as an American, you know, as an artist, as a Christian, just as a human being, you know.
It was the movie that became a kind of Rorschach test. Gibson and tens of millions of Christians who saw the film say it was simply evoking the New Testament version of Jews, Romans, and the brutal crucifixion of Jesus. But the leaders of several Jewish organizations launched a campaign arguing that Gibson had seeded the film with deliberately anti-Semitic images. And they warned that Gibson might be inciting a new wave of hatred, even violence against Jews. He says that never happened.
The film came out, it was released, and you could have heard a pin drop, you know. Even the crickets weren't chirping. But the other thing I never heard was one single word of apology. I thought I dealt with that stuff, all forgiveness, but the human heart's a funny thing. Sometimes you can bear the scars of resentment, and it'll come out, you know, when you're overwrought and you take a few drinks. So.
Is there hate in your heart? Is there anger in your heart?
There was anger from that, I think, because I felt that I was unjustly treated. My resentment stemmed from certain individuals treating me in a certain way.
But we ask about those people he thought should apologize to him. Can they now argue they were right about what he is inside?
Can you say anti-Semitic things and not be anti-Semitic? Can you say intolerant things and not be an intolerant person?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, because one changes from day to day, and there are different forces exercised on you that may or may not. And people every day say things they don't mean and things they don't feel. They may feel them temporarily. I mean, we're all broken.
And he says he is now learning more about those who were hearing his words. In an earlier apology, he had asked the Jewish community for dialogue and help.
But I heard back that a woman who had read the apology actually wept with relief. Now, that sort of hit me. I was like, relief? Oh my God, she was afraid. She was terrified. And wow, you know, I don't think I realized until like a couple of 4 days later, 5 days later, that what I did was press a big fear button.
You didn't realize that?
I didn't realize the level of fear that was there.
What did you think it was?
Me, it was just the stupid ramblings of a drunkard, you know. And I guess I had to sort of think, well, hang on, it's conceivable that they think I could be the next goose-stepping maniac to come into their neighborhood, you know. I don't know.
But for several years, there has been one other question that has plagued him. The fact that his father, Hutton Gibson, has famously publicly expressed doubts that 6 million Jews were really murdered in the Holocaust.
And the last time I went down this trail, you...
Yeah. I bit your head off.
It was 3 years ago in an interview. Mel Gibson began by telling us he does believe 6 million Jews were murdered.
It was an atrocity of monumental proportion.
But when we ask him to repudiate the assertions of his dad...
He's my father. Gotta leave it alone, Diane. Gotta leave it alone.
But I want to go back, because your father has been on the record. This is not an assumption. He has been on the record saying things like the Holocaust, quote, mostly fiction, that it's been hyped out of proportion.
Yeah. Well, we're talking about me here right now, and me taking responsibility for my words and actions. And I'm certainly not going to use him to sort of put anything off of me.
Even if it's the explanation for what happened that night?
It isn't the explanation for what happened that night. It isn't. It has nothing to do with it. It's, that's in my own heart. I was taught that there are good and bad people of any race and creed, you know.
What's the main thing we all need to do to bridge prejudice, bigotry, intolerance?
Have dinner. That's it.
Talk.
Yeah. And here.
But we ask about those in the Hollywood community who say it's too late and he should be ostracized.
What do you feel about them?
Well, I feel sad because, you know, they've obviously been hurt and frightened and offended enough to feel that they have to do that. And it's their choice.
In the meantime, Gibson says he has to go on battling his old demons of rage and alcohol, and hoping, even if there's not a Hollywood ending in sight, that somehow, somewhere, there's at least another chance.
Somebody said to me once, pain is the precursor to change.
Yeah, who said that? Socrates?
In fact, it was Gibson himself.
How ashamed have you been?
Oh, quite ashamed, yeah. And it's you know, that's the price you pay, because sometimes it's what you need. Many people have reached out. My goodness, I mean, I've been overwhelmed, almost choked me. So overwhelmed by the response of friends, family, and you know, even the Jewish community. I mean, the letters and the stuff that came in were really encouraging. Sort of broke my heart a little bit. So it's like they understood. There's a lot of compassion out there. So that was kind of overwhelming for me. So it was, and I don't want to disappoint anyone again, you know. And what I need to do to heal myself and to be assuring and allay the fears of others, and to heal them if they had any heart, you know, any heart wounds from something I may have said. So this is the last thing I want to be, is that kind of monster.
So as we said yesterday, everyone will decide for themselves about Mel Gibson according to their own definitions of repentance, which we looked up, and by the way, at its Latin root means to suffer a deeper pain. A couple of other notes about him, by the way. We asked him if he was going to give some large sums of money to interreligious causes. He said he is earmarking his donations privately. He does not believe in seeking public credit for what you give. And as you may have read, his Holocaust project with Disney was canceled, but he says he may do it somewhere else, and added that he did this interview now because he says he doesn't want this issue ever to be used as publicity for the Disney film he has coming out later this year.